Good morning and welcome to a history tour of the Chinn House on our Warsaw campus. Here's a recent picture of the house decked out for the holidays. Just to, as background, the house is owned by the state of Virginia like our other campus buildings. It went through a renovation in 2018-19, and the VCCS had to confer with the Department of Historic Resources on the project to make sure we were doing everything right. And while we were doing that, the VCCS realized the importance of this building, and they were encouraged by Historic Resources to list it in the National Register, which they did in 2020. So I don't know if there are other houses listed in the National Register that the VCCS owns, but I'm sure the Chinn House is just one of a handful, if that. But I want to start our tour in 1899, about 10 years before the Chinn House was constructed. Warsaw was a village centered around the colonial era courthouse. It had a bank, a newspaper, a couple of eating establishments, and general stores. And the neighborhood around the campus was farmland and a few houses dotted Route 360 going towards Tappahannock. This is a picture taken probably from the Atlantic Union Bank parking lot. You can see Route 360 going into the background to the right. That's Main Street, and the house to the far left, that's no longer standing, and that's the building where the Daily and the newspaper are today. And notice the horse hitches in front of the building where Atlantic Union is today. "70 years before that picture was taken, the village had been called Richmond County Courthouse. Here's an old picture of the courthouse. It still stands today. It was built in the 18th century. But in 1831, the village was changed the name to Warsaw to commemorate the Battle of Warsaw, fought in September of 1831 between Imperial Russia and Poland. Poland had fought fiercely against the much larger Russian forces, but surrendered in the fall of 1831. Coming only 50 years after the American Revolution, the battle and the Poles' fight for independence from Russia struck a chord with Americans. Several communities, including those in Kentucky, North Carolina, Illinois, Alabama, and here in Virginia, changed their names to Warsaw. In 1899, a young woman named Sarah Douglas, whose family owned the land on which the Chinn House now sits, married Joseph William Chinn Jr., who was serving as Commonwealth's attorney for Richmond County. And here's a picture of the Chinn House to the far right, probably around the year it was built, and what Richmond Road, Richmond Tappahannock Highway looked like at the time. I'll go back to this one. Joseph Chinn was born in Tappahannock in a house now owned by St. Margaret's School, but he was actually raised in Richmond County. The couple lived with Sarah Douglas's parents in Warsaw, and over the next 9 years had 2 sons and 2 daughters. The Douglases gave the couple the tract of land that's near their house. I don't think their house is still standing, the Douglases, so that they could build their own home for their growing family. Construction began in 1907 and completed in 1908. And here's a picture of the house soon after it was built. I don't have any photographs of Sarah Douglas Chinn other than the one here. Here she is on the front steps with 4 of her children. After they moved into the Chinn House, Sarah and Joseph Chinn would have one more daughter, a daughter named Mary Douglas, after they moved into the house. The National Register nomination documents the importance of Joseph Chinn within local and state government in the early 1900s. And this picture was taken probably around 1899 to 1910. Choosing law as a profession, Chinn graduated from the University of Virginia Law School and passed the bar exam in 1890. He began his private practice in the town of Warsaw. He was elected at the young age of 23 as Commonwealth's attorney, and he held that position for 24 consecutive years until he was appointed as a circuit judge in Virginia's 12th court, and that was in 1915. He held that position as a judge on the circuit court until 1931. And then here's an old picture of Judge Chinn as an older man. In 1931, the governor of Virginia appointed him to fill a vacancy on the Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals following the death of Robert Riddick Prentice. Chinn was elected to fill this position by the General Assembly in 1932. And locally, Judge Chinn gave much of his time and attention to various business and social enterprises. He was a founder and the first president of the Northern Neck State Bank, that's now Atlantic Union Bank, and he held that position until his death in 1936. In 1919, he became president and director of the Northern Neck Telegraph and Telephone Company. He also served as superintendent of schools for Richmond County. He was a Freemason, establishing the Warsaw Lodge number 332, and was appointed master in 1920. Additionally, Judge Chinn served on the Board of Visitors at the University of Virginia from 1914 and 1916, and was also very active in St. John's Church, which is just down the street from the Chinn House. Now let's look at the architectural features of the house and what it was like growing up in this home that was surrounded by a working farm. Judge Chinn would purchase additional acreage around the house that his in-laws gave him, and eventually that acreage totaled 140 acres, and it was an active farm managed by a gentleman named Walter Richardson. Here's a picture of some chickens on the farm. It was taken in the parking lot, what is now the parking lot of the main parking lot of the Warsaw campus. Notable buildings on the farm in the early 20th century were a large barn that housed horse stalls, a corn crib, a tack room, and an attached carriage house. There was a silo, a farm machinery shed, a milking shed, and a windmill with a water tank. And behind the barn was a hen house, a smokehouse, and a woodshed. The Richardsons also had a home on the farm. I don't have a picture of the Richardsons, but I do have a photo of their son, Joe. Here he is, sitting on the steps of the Chinn House in the late 1930s with his puppy. It's a great picture. The Chinn House was built by James Eppie Newman of Baltimore, who had family ties to the area. Two men named Willie Barker and Otis Clark of Lancaster laid the building's foundation. Many of the architectural interior features of the house were prefabricated in Baltimore and arrived by steamboat. The steamboat line that ran back and forth between the east and west banks of the Rappahannock onto the Chesapeake Bay in Baltimore would dock at Welford's Wharf, a few miles from Warsaw. This is a fuzzy picture, but you can see in the center of the photograph the steamboat with smoke coming out of its stack. Here's a map of the area showing Welford's Wharf kind of near the bottom center of the map where the steamboat would stop. It would go up route. They would load wagons with materials, go up Route 630 out to Route 3 where Cobbin Park Baptist Church is, and then into town. The staircase is made of quartered oak, and the floorboards were also brought up by steamboat. They're pine. They're beautiful leaded concave glass windows in the house. You can see one in the far right. That's the back door of the center hallway of the house. It goes into the kitchen. I'll have a better photograph of that in a minute. And this picture was taken about 1930. And that's about the time that electricity was installed in the house. And before that, there were gas wall sconces and the windmill I mentioned before that pumped water into the house. So it did have running water. So the house was originally painted yellow. It has a hipped roof and it is designed in the colonial revival style, which was very popular from about 1890 to about 1940. And as you enter the front door, you can see this is a beautiful, I mentioned leaded glass window. There are two of them on either side of the front door. As you enter the front door, you come into a spacious central hallway with a fireplace. Judge Chinn's office is to the left of the front door. We now use it as a dining room, and we let community groups use it. In fact, the Rotary Club of Warsaw met there this morning. Across the hallway is the parlor or the sitting room. And the Chinn family, when they left the house to the state, did leave some money to the college's educational foundation, an endowment that spends off money each year that allows us to do cosmetic beautification to the house and to furnishings like reupholster furnishings, things that the state can't pay for. These aren't original furnishings, but they are antiques and would be similar to something that the Chinns would have enjoyed when they lived there. Here's the fireplace in the sitting room with the beautiful green glazed tiles and this acanthus or swag detail and classical Greek figure, again, all made in Baltimore and brought by steamboat. So next to the sitting room is a smaller room that now houses Chris Stamper's office. The Chinn's granddaughter recalled that it was a kind of a men's smoking room, is what she called it. Across the center hallway is the President Kennedy's room. Now, back in the early 1900s, was used as the dining room for the family. Here's the back door of the center hallway that goes into the kitchen. You can see that light that I mentioned. You saw it in the 1930 photograph. And the kitchen has the original cabinetry still there today. The cabinet sometimes open. It's a little wonky, but it's really beautiful, and we enjoy looking at it when we go into the kitchen. And back into the center hallway, the panel on the east wall of the staircase, and below that is a built-in bench with an inlaid lid that opens up for storage. Corbels with an acanthus leaf motif support the plaster wall arches over the staircase, connecting the center hall to the west portion of the house. And upstairs, there's 6 rooms that originally housed the Chinn's bedroom, their daughter's room, son's room, and 2 guest rooms. One of the 3 Chinn daughters, named Sally, here she is as an older woman, wrote and illustrated a memoir about her childhood. And this is what she writes about the nursery. That was her bedroom. It's now Beth Robbins and Carrie Wiersma's office. Here it is. Sally Chinn wrote, "One of my earliest memories centers around the nursery, a large room with big windows through which the sunlight filtered on the white spreads of double beds and cast flickering squares of light on the woven rug. At one end of the nursery, an open fire blazed merrily on a winter's evening. There was security and warmth in this room, a sense of belonging in this tranquil environment where many hours were spent in happy and imaginative play." So Mrs. Chinn, Sarah Chinn, passed away in 1932 and Judge Chinn in 1936. And I show you these 2 photographs. The one on the upper left is that 1899 photograph of Warsaw. And in the bottom is a 1940 photograph of Warsaw. And you can see how much changed in the world and in the town during the time that the Chinns lived in the house. The horse hitches are gone. Now you've got cars. The bridge that connected Tappahannock to Warsaw was built during that time, and many of the buildings were torn down and new ones constructed. So really looks like the Warsaw that we know today. So when the Chinns died, their youngest child, Mary Douglas, and her husband, Bonnie Morris, lived in the house, and this with their infant daughter. She was also called Mary Douglas. Here she is, probably around 1938. And they had one more daughter named Elizabeth Landon, and Elizabeth Landon and Mary Douglas would play upstairs in the walk-up attic. And during restoration of the Chinn House, over a couple of restorations, they've left the drawings on the plaster walls upstairs in the attic, which are cool to see. These were probably done around 1945. And here's Mary Douglas, just taken last month as a grown woman. And she's here with a gentleman who lived in the house during World War II. The house was subdivided during the war, and Mary Douglas and her sister and parents lived upstairs. And a family, this gentleman, Rudy, whose last name I can't recall, he and his family lived downstairs. And Rudy's in his 90s. He was a soldier in World War II, and when he came home from the war, lived with his parents downstairs in the apartment. And they both came to visit recently and reminisced about what it was like to live there. In 1954, the family converted the house to a tourist home, and they called it Walnut Lodge, after an old walnut tree in the yard. The numbers on the rooms, on the boarding rooms, are still on the doors today. Here's my room, my office, which is pretty cool to see. Lots of layers of history remain today in the house. So when Mary Douglas and Elizabeth Landon, the grandchildren of the Chinns, when they grew up and their parents died, they moved out of the Chinn House. And the descendants of Judge Chinn, many of whom lived outside of the state, they were kind of faced with, what do we do with our family home? So in 1969, the family wanted to honor Judge Chinn and his wife, Sarah, and they made the generous decision to donate the Chinn House and all of its property, what they owned at the time, which was then 100 acres, to the state of Virginia for purposes of education. The Warsaw campus was constructed, I think it was opened in 1973. And for the first 2 years of classes, the RCC held them in the Chinn House until the building was constructed. There is a great history of the college's first 25 years that you can read in our libraries or check out, that details how the two campus sites at Glens and Warsaw were chosen, and sort of the political maneuverings of the county governments to come together to form our service region. And it was written by Ron Carter, who was an English professor at RCC at the time. We celebrated our 25th anniversary. And just going back to another map, showing in the kind of upper center part of this map, to the east of Route 360, or to the, what that would be, the south of Route 360, you can see the property, the RCC campus, and how close it is downtown. There's a creek that runs behind our property called Jugs Creek. Lots of wooded area, lots of open space, a beautiful piece of property. And we're very close to the town, and we should be very proud that we're part of it, the revitalization of Warsaw. Dr. Kennedy mentioned in Convocation that the sidewalk Sidewalks will be extended from the downtown to the campus, and will really become an integral part of Warsaw and where the western gateway to the community. So I hope you've enjoyed this history tour, and thanks for joining me.